All right, so we get to cast our nets. We get to invite people to Easter services. We have a series coming up called Foolish, and the question is the gospel foolishness? Now, April 1st, you know what that Sunday is? That's Easter Sunday. That's also what? April Fool's Day. So I thought, we'll just play on that and have fun with it. And so the foolishness of the cross, the foolishness of the resurrection, and then Jim Elliot said he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep in order to gain what he cannot lose. And so we're going to talk about what the world thinks is foolishness that we believe. And there's going to be something for everybody during the season, whether you're checking out Christianity or whether you've been around for a long time. So we encourage you to take one of these cards. There's lots of them, actually. Take a few of them or take as many as you want, and if you'll hand them out, okay, and give them out and invite somebody. If you invite people, they'll come to church with you. They will. So just go ahead and do that. Hey, some of us went to Haiti. We just got back a week ago, and you wanted to see a little more about what happened there. So just have a few slides, a little slideshow. This is a 54-foot concrete cross that was erected over northwest Haiti. Port-au-Paix is where we went. We've been going there about 5 years now, and in that time, this missionary building has been built. This is a residence for the missionaries. Rainbow that day. It's kind of pretty. This is Ryan with one of the little girls there from Haiti. He came with us. Ryan was there. This is from the top of the cross. We had the scaffolding up at that time. We were not finished yet. And you can see kind of the ocean there. That's the ocean. And then you see the green roof down there is the church that's been built. There's a nutrition center. And then the missionary housing. This is another picture of Port-au-Paix. Keep going. Now, this is Mike. He came with us, and we did a video. You saw that video last week. You can check it out online. This is a young man. His name's Ricky that lost his leg in the earthquake. In 2010. We're still trying to get him some prosthesis. These are just the young men, right? They're there. They're always going to pose. I love that. These are kids waiting in line. There's about 130 kids every day that wait in line for what's next. A little bowl of rice and beans. They just get a little rice and beans, but it's got nutrition in it. It's good enough to take care of them. But the next time you're in line for McDonald's and you're waiting there and you're kind of complaining, right? Just buy the person's lunch behind you and be thankful, okay, that you get Big Mac or whatever, okay? This is the new nutrition center that's going up, and the floor is kind of dirty there, but go to the next slide, and that shows the nice place that now they're going to be able to be in to get nutrition, and we're excited about that and hoping to serve more and more kids in that area. Well, this is a guy who has never had a bed, and we bought him a bed. Isn't that fun? Isn't that great? And this is Ryan again from the top of the cross waving at us. Next slide shows him painting up there. It was windy that day, and he got all messed up, man, with paint, but hey, it was great. That's another picture of the cross. These are some young ladies that are part of an orphanage there that Larry and Diana established years ago, and now these young ladies are growing up to know Jesus. They sang this song, and I'll play it for you someday, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful. This is Larry talking with one of the guys who's known for a long time there. I love that picture. This is church. Again, this is church. You see the wooden pews. I like those wooden pews. I'm going to put those in here. That way you can't fall asleep during my sermon, right? All right. Just kidding. Hey, this is Ricardo. And Ricardo, his story, I wanted to make sure to tell you the story of Ricardo. He when he was 8 years old, his parents lost him. They came north to the city there from a city further south, and they lost him. In other words, they left him there to be on his own. They couldn't take care of him anymore. And so he lived on the streets for 7 years. Can you imagine? Fending for yourself, living on the streets. And finally, that's when Larry and Diana found him. And at age 15, he came into the work of the mission there. And now he's gone to high school, and he's going to go on to college, university. And he has a pair of drumsticks because he plays drums. Okay, for the worship band. And those drumsticks are from right up here because Ronnie had told me, he had been there the week before, that he had broken his drumsticks, didn't have any drumsticks. So he is playing with your drumsticks. Way to go, church. Isn't that great? Yeah, all right. So this little girl that got adopted, or not adopted, I mean like in the official sense, but is being sponsored so she can go to school now. by somebody in our church. It's awesome. Hey, this kid's what it's all about. All right, that's what it's all about. So let's give praise to God for what he is doing in Haiti, and I thank you for your support for what he's doing there. Thank you. All right. Well, we've been in this series called Healthy Conversations. We're going to talk about crucial conversations, healthy relationships. In week 1, we talked about a healthy relationship begins with a healthy you, that begins with understanding your identity in Jesus Christ, that you are a son, you are a daughter of the living God. Next week, we talked about communication. Third week, we talked about assumptions and expectations, and how expectations are only valid when they're agreed upon. And so we need to understand that sometimes we get disappointed by each other because we have unmet expectations that are never really meant to be made in the first place. And then we talked about emotions and how they're kind of like the light on your dashboard of your vehicle. When they come up, you can just keep ignoring that check engine light so long. And there's something there. And so you gotta find out what's happening. Well, today we're going to talk about crucial conversations. You know, the goal of I think anybody, really, many of us, anybody that has a decent life, decent goals, Christian or even a non-Christian, our goal is to live lives of authenticity and integrity. Wouldn't you say that's true? I mean, most of us, if you're a good person, you want to live a life of integrity. And there are times, however, that even the best of us have lapses in our integrity. And we're going to talk today about a time when that happened in Scripture between two people, a guy named Peter and a guy named Paul. And we're going to start with the definition of integrity, right? It's to be the same. It's to be integrated. It's like you live, the life that you live on stage is the same as the life you live off stage. That when everybody's looking, you're living a certain way. And when everybody's not looking, you're living a certain way. You're living the same way. And that's integrity. Now, how many of us can say that we live lives of perfect integrity, right? And so there are times when all of us fall into this category that Peter found himself in. And again, we're going to talk about this story. Now, before we talk about this story, we're going to get some background. And the background is that at that time, there were Jewish people and there were Gentile people. That was in the days of Jesus. And that's still a common denominator, I guess, today. But the Jewish people, at that point in time, they were seen as the chosen people of God. And so they were chosen. They were God's favorites. Now, the Gentiles then, on the converse side of that, if you're not the favorites of God, if you're not chosen people, what are you? Well, you're not the favorites. Do you remember as a kid? I do. I've got 2 sisters, and I always thought my sister's the favorite. Right? Know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's little things that go on, like in the families. Hey, she's the favorite, he's the favorite, what's going on? And we have these things. And so it seemed at that time that there was this concept that in the family of God that there were favorites. And there were people that weren't favorites. The Jews were the favorites. The Gentiles were not the favorites of God. And so as the gospel came into the world, as Jesus Christ lived, died, buried, rose again from the dead, and he gives us good news about how all of us can be saved, but the early church had not yet kind of grasped this. And so the Gentiles were still excluded from this gospel, this good news about Jesus. And so there was a guy named Cornelius. He was a centurion. He was a Gentile. And the scripture describes in Acts 10 as Cornelius was a devout, God-fearing man. He gave generously to those in need. He prayed. And so he's just this good guy, and God saw this, and so he sent his angel to the house of Cornelius. And the angel's message was, go and call for Peter, the apostle Peter, this Jewish guy. Now, Peter is the same Peter that, we all know and love. Peter is at this house of Simon the tanner, who's down by the sea, Joppa. And Peter is at midday, he's having his time with God on the roof of a house. That's kind of the houses were built that way. And he has this vision. And in this vision, this sheet comes down, and it's filled with all kinds of animals and things that you do not eat if you're a good Jewish person. It had four-legged creatures. It had reptiles, and all kinds of birds. And in southern China, I visited there. They'll eat anything that's not, that, has four legs or, you'd see the reptiles and they'll eat them. And it's like, ooh, that looks gross. But this is what he's presented with. And then he hears this voice that says, Peter, eat. And Peter goes, no way. I'm part of God's chosen people. I'm not going to eat that stuff. And then here's what the voice of God says to him in this vision. He says, whatever I have called pure, don't you call it impure. Do not call anything impure that God has called clean. And so Peter takes that to heart, and then the folks from Cornelius' house come and say, hey, come and visit with us. And so he goes with them, and this is the conversation that he has at the house. Acts chapter 10, verse 34. Here's what he says. Then Peter began to speak to all of those people in this Gentile house with the Jews listening in, and he says, I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. You know the message God sent to the people of Israel, announcing the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all. And so what happens this day is that the wall is torn down. There's peace now that's made through Jesus Christ between Jew and Gentile, between those who were not God's people and those who are God's people. And now we discover this wonderful good news that all of us get to be God's people. Not just one race, but all of us get to be the people of God. This is the gospel. The Holy Spirit falls on them. They're baptized. And now the Gentiles are full citizens, full members of the God's people. Now, roll the story forward. And here's all of that's the background, to our story for today. And this is Peter. This is Paul. And Peter finds himself, he's in the stages of the city of Antioch. And Peter, it says when Peter, Cephas, maybe your version of the Bible says Cephas, but it's Peter. When Peter came to Antioch, I, Paul, opposed him to his face. Well, that doesn't sound very Christian, right? To oppose somebody to their face? No, Paul says, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. In other words, he had learned his lesson, and he learned that it's okay to eat any of this stuff and to be with everybody. But now he was separating himself. And when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. That's the Jewish people. The other Jews joined him in his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was the encourager, but even Barnabas was led astray. And when I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, we're going to come back to that, the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter in front of them all, you are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile, not a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs? You see, Peter was lacking integrity. Peter's life he was not living out this good news. He was allowing other people to influence him. He was falling into wanting to please a certain group of people. And what was on the line was the truth. And the truth is that the gospel, that we are saved not by observing the law, but by faith and our hope in Jesus Christ, who is resurrected from the dead. And so Paul has a crucial conversation with Peter. So we're going to talk about crucial conversations this morning. And I wonder if this is something that's really lacking in the church. I just wonder sometimes if this is why we don't grow up more in our relationship with Jesus. If this is why we don't walk with Jesus closer, is because we fail to have crucial conversations with one another. What is a crucial conversation? Well, it's when people have opposing opinions. Anybody ever had opposing opinion, right, with somebody else? So you have an opposing opinion, and then you have strong emotions. A lot of times that goes along with an opposing opinion. And then there are high stakes. The stakes are high. And so when this happens, you've got one of two choices. You can either enter into that crucial conversation or you can avoid it. And we're going to talk about each of those possibilities. But what happens a lot of times is that we fall into this myth. And the myth is that you can't keep a friend and have a crucial conversation with them. And that's a lie. It's a lie. Because when you have a critical conversation with them, what happens is you have the opportunity for that relationship to get closer instead of farther away. And really, isn't it true that when you see somebody that you know and love, and you see them making a beeline toward a cliff and they're going to fall off of it, what's the thing you do if you love them? You try to jump in their way and stop them, right? You don't just, I don't care, just go ahead and kill yourself. No. You have a crucial conversation because you love them. And so we've got to get in there. We've got to understand that when truth is at stake, and maybe it's performance at work, and you just, maybe you're somebody who's in charge of other people, but you just ignore having that conversation with them. Or maybe it's a struggle with sin, and you see somebody struggling with sin, and you know that you've got a relationship with that person, that you could talk to them about that, and yet you just let it go. See, truth matters. It matters. And so here's the question. When you find yourself stuck in a relationship with somebody, in other words, it's like, man, our relationship, we used to be good friends, or things, was going well, but now it seems like our relationship is stagnant, or I feel kind of at odds with this person. I don't know what's going on. Here's what you do. You ask yourself this question. What crucial conversation are we not holding or not holding well? And that, it's really important that we're willing to have these conversations because the truth matters. Here's what Jesus says about the truth in John chapter 8. He says to the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, and you are really my disciples. So see, the teaching means that if you hold to that, you're really my disciples, and then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. See, that's why the truth's important, because the truth sets us free. It sets us free. And so we've got to be willing to talk to each other. What's the opposite of love? It's not hate, it's indifference. It's indifference. And we have to be willing to have these conversations if we're going to grow in our relationship with Jesus. I ran across a little story this week. Truth and lies. We're little kids one day, and they were little boys, and they decided to go skinny dipping, truth and lies. And so they found their favorite swimming holes, and they went skinny dipping. And so they were playing all those games that kids play, Marco Polo and all that stuff. And then they decided to play this game called Who Can Hold Your Breath the Longest. Have you guys played that game? And so truth, he went down and he's holding his breath, but lies, instead of going down under, he decides to run away. But not only does he run away, he runs away with truth's clothes. Takes his clothes and he goes home. Well, truth, he thinks he's winning, he's under there, and then he comes up and he realizes that he had been had. And so he goes to Lie's house, knocks on the door. Hey, and Lies opens up the door, and Lies has his clothes on. And he's like, hey, those are my clothes, give me my clothes. And Lies says, I don't know what you're talking about, these are my clothes. I've been here all morning, I don't know what you're talking about. And they start fighting and arguing and bickering back and forth about, what's really true here and what's going on. And then this fight gets so intense that it goes on out into the street, and people start gathering around, and they see what's going on, and they're like, oh, whose clothes are these? What's happening? And so finally, truth has to speak up, and he says this. He says, who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe lies in truth's clothing or the naked truth? And see, that's a question, isn't it? Are we going to just keep believing lies in truth's clothing, or are we going to believe the truth? Are we going to speak truth? And are we going to receive truth into our lives? And what's important is that Paul speaks truth to Peter. He speaks truth. And to Paul's credit, he does it to his face. I love that. Now that's a man right there. That's a man who can go to another man and talk truth to that man. That's reality. That's honest. That's an honest relationship. When you can you don't talk behind their back. You don't talk about them and try to stir up a coalition, build a coalition against them. You go to that person and you speak face to face with that person. By the way, that's a real woman too, I think. That's being upright. That's having integrity. That's what integrity is all about. It's speaking the truth to one another. And to Peter's credit, he receives the truth. He receives it. His life is changed. He repents. He submits to it. Now, how do I know that? Well, there's another thing that happens later on. It's called the Council of Jerusalem. And this takes place in Acts chapter 15. And what I understand is that this incident between Paul and Peter, we just talked about, this happens before this council. And so at this council, there's a big question. The big debate is if a Gentile needed to be circumcised to be saved. And Paul and Barnabas, they go up to Jerusalem to meet with the other apostles and to argue this question. Now, when I was a kid, I got to tell you the story. I was in a class with some other adults. I was the only kid in there. And so, they're talking about circumcision. I'm like, so I asked, what's circumcision? And I never saw the pastor's face get redder. It was funny. But you know what? That's what's going on. And they're having this issue, this question about circumcision. But the bigger issue was, do you have to become a Jew? Do you have to live by Jewish customs before you can become a Christian? Do you have to submit yourself to all the Old Testament laws and all that stuff before you can become a Christian? So this is an important issue. And here's what happens. Peter and Paul, they stand locked together in unified, and they're saying, no, you do not have to do those Old Testament customs to become a Christian. Gentiles are becoming Christians, and you do not, we are saved by grace through faith, and it's not by observing the law. Hallelujah. It's a pretty critical moment in church's history. I mean, what if we came this morning, before you could become a Christian, you had to become a Jewish, submit to all the Jewish Old Testament customs? What would that be like, right? How would that interfere with the gospel, the good news? And so, the question I have for you today is this. How is it that you respond to correction? How do you respond? And I love it. It's like these guys are together and they had this argument, but then they worked it out. It's kind of like when you're a family, you're in a family. I can have disagreements with people in my family, and we can go after each other pretty good, but at the end of the day, we're together, and if somebody's coming against somebody in my family, guess what? You got the whole family against you, man. I mean, that's just how it works in my family. It's kind of like The Godfather. I watched The Godfather again this week. It was great. Don't be only outside of the Godfather's family, right? I mean, it's like family's family. That's what's important. And see, these folks, they realize, okay, we can have disagreements, we can have arguments, but we're family. We're on the same mission. We're after the same things. We're after the truth that sets us free. And so the question is, how hard is it for you to receive correction? I was at breakfast the other day, and I was getting ready to put sweetener in my coffee, and I put sweetener in my coffee. And this guy there at breakfast with me, he told me how bad that sweetener was for me. He was like, don't you realize how bad that is for you, and how it doesn't get, digested, and it goes through, and it causes cancer and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm just ready to have a cup of coffee, And here you are messing up my coffee. I mean, I'm just ready to enjoy it. I had to set it aside. I couldn't drink it. Yeah. But here's the reason this guy told me, because I think he loves me. He wants me to live a good long life. I think that's the reason he told me. It wasn't so that he would mess up my coffee, right? He's told me the truth. And you know what was in me, though? I have to be honest. What I wanted to do was I want to say, mind your own business. I mean, come on. I mean, I want to do what I want to do. I don't care what you think. That's kind of how I was feeling at the moment. And so I think we all need to ask ourselves that question. What is it going on in us when somebody confronts us? When somebody has a hard thing to say to us that's true? And I think it's important that we ask ourselves a question, because only in that way are we going to grow as people. If we just keep avoiding truth, we're not going to ever grow up. We're just going to stay little children in our faith. We got to grow up. We got to grow up. So we need to give each other permission to have these conversations. Now, we need to have a safe environment. And I put together a little acrostic. It's share your heart, affirm goals, that we're in this together. Facts, separate facts from fiction, explore, listen, make sure you're doing it. But the bottom line is we've got to do it out of love and respect. And a lot of times we need these conversations in our marriages. Now, here's what Paul says about our marriages when we have these conversations. He says in Ephesians 6:33, however, each one of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So what do you see there? Love and respect. And so many times we have conversations like these, and they don't have love and respect in them, or at least it doesn't sound like it. In the tone and the way that we have these conversations with one another. So make sure that when you're having this, you're doing it out of love and respect. At work or here in the church, Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourself. So when you have a hard conversation, do it in a respectful way, in a way that honors that person instead of demeans them or degrades them or makes them feel low and dirty. There are moments when there's disproportionate influence. There's moments when it's critical that we speak up, and we have this opportunity to say something or not to say something. And I love what the Proverbs says in Proverbs 15:23. A person finds joy in giving an apt reply. How good a timely word is. That's really important. That we have a timely word, that we make sure that as we're speaking, that it's the right timing, that we're looking for that right opportunity. Communication. I love this next little picture here. I love this couple sitting here, and they say, "This is the best time we've had together in weeks. Let's not spoil it by talking." And my question is that couple have a good relationship? What do you think? No way, right? I mean, you would just say, there's no way that couple has a good, but let's just not talk about it. And see, that's what sometimes we do, right? When we have hard things we need to say, we just don't talk about it. And then we think we're in good relationship because there's nothing going on. It seems like it's peaceful. But in reality, it's not peaceful. And in reality is, you're just covering it up. You're just covering it up. And so, there's a book that was written by Joseph Grenny called Crucial Conversations, and in it he puts this up. He says that there's this super awesome goal that we're after. Maybe in marriage, it's just a really great marriage together, or job. There's goals that we set in our workplace, and we have these great goals up there in church. Church. The goal that we have as a church is to make disciples of Jesus and to reach our community for Jesus and to be a blessing, to see children come to Jesus, teens, and have great marriages and just really bless our families. And so you have the super awesome goal that's out there. But then there's something that's in between you, us as a church, and that super awesome goal, and that is that there's some critical conversations we'll have to have. If we're, in order to reach people, if you keep doing if you're not reaching people now, you keep doing the same things, you're not going to reach people in the future. So you got to change. You got to be willing to make some changes, and we got to have some crucial conversations. And the temptation is to avoid those conversations. If you have a great marriage, maybe you got to change some things, and the temptation is just to avoid it. Just keep it level. Just keep it on the surface. Let's not talk about it. Things are going great when we're not talking. Oh, and what you need to do to meet this super awesome goal, see, it's so worth it, is you got to get those crucial conversations, and then they build the steps toward the awesome goal. That's the only way that you're going to be able to meet it, is if you build this goal. But there's two options when we get to a crucial conversation. You can either talk it out or you're going to act it out. And talking it out is just having this conversation and getting information. And next week, we're going to talk about how to fight fair. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to finish up our series on how to fight fair. Does anybody have a pair of boxing gloves? I need a pair of boxing gloves for next week. So if you got one, let me know. And we're going to talk about how to fight fair, and that's what we're doing next week. But here's the thing. We need to talk things out. And if you don't talk it out, you know what you're going to do? You're going to act it out. You're going to act it out. Remember how we talked about unresolved feelings don't die, they just get buried alive? They don't die. If you don't resolve your feelings between somebody, they don't die, they just get buried alive, and then they're going to raise up again. And in the same way, if you don't talk through a crucial conversation with someone else, then what's going to happen is you're going to act it out. You're going to become cynical. You're going to become passive aggressive. You're going to become, you might even just leave because that's frustrating you so much. And so there's no way around it. We need to be willing to get honest and have these conversations. The Bible is full of these conversations. Moses has a crucial conversation with God on the mountain. Paul has a crucial conversation with Jesus on a road to Damascus. Why are you persecuting me? Jesus has a crucial conversation in the Garden of Eden. Not my will, Lord, but your will be done. And there's that moment, that hazardous little moment where we wonder, if I have this conversation, is this going to interrupt my relationship with this other person? And the reality is that it's going to strengthen your relationship if you love each other. And here's the deal, and listen to this. Candor is never the problem. People never become defensive about what you're saying. People become defensive because of why they think you're saying it. Did you catch that? People don't become defensive about what you're saying. They become defensive because of why they think you're saying it. See, if it's true and you are saying it because you love that person and you're going to willing to listen, it's safe, and they have an opportunity to talk it out with you and explain themselves, and you're going to listen and work it out, then that's a safe environment, and you're going to generate understanding, and there's going to be greater unity. See? There's going to be greater unity. There's going to be love shown. And see, when you have something hard to say to somebody and they're wrong, and you help give them a course correction that saves them from sin or saves them from going a wrong way or being self-destructive, because if they know that you love them, if you know that you really do it out of caring about them and not about your own personal agenda or you looking good or looking to criticize them or undercut them or one-up them, then there's going to be unity. You're going to have a chance to grow. See, what if Paul would have never had this crucial conversation with Peter? What if Peter just went on and just showed favoritism toward one group of people and not toward another? Would anybody follow Peter? Would anybody listen to the gospel? Would anybody really live it? Because, well, the leaders aren't living it. I mean, that would be such a blight on the name of Jesus. And so he had to have this conversation. See, James, here's what he says. James, later on in James chapter 5, verse 19, he says, "My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring that person back, remember this, whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins." See, that's why we do it, because it's important. So we're either in this pit or we're on a path. Okay? We're in the pit of not talking about it and just letting it mull around and we feel bad, or we're on a path toward being real and honest and growing toward those goals, that goal of becoming more and more like Jesus Christ. Well, we're going to finish up our time this morning with this. It's a critical conversation that Jesus had with his church. And this is recorded in Revelation chapters 2 and 3. Jesus is talking to his church, and I've been in a group that we've been looking at the book of Revelation, and Jesus has a critical conversation with his church, and he points some things out about things are not right. He talks to the church of Ephesus, and he says, "Hey, guess what? You've lost your first love. Come on, church, wake up. Wake up, you've lost your first love." And the one I want to point out this morning is Laodicea. Laodicea had become, he said, lukewarm. And this is what Jesus says, you know what? You're neither hot nor cold. You know what I want to do with you guys? I want to spit you out of my mouth. Well, that's not very nice, Jesus. That's not very Christ-like. Huh? Yes, it is. See, Jesus is having a real honest conversation with his church. And here's what he says in Revelation 2:19 to the church of Laodicea. He says, "Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline." Wow. Rebuke, I mean, that's a sharp word. It's a harsh word. But Jesus rebukes us. He rebukes those he loves. Whom I love, I rebuke and I discipline. And see, we lose that sometimes. And we need to love each other enough to be honest with each other and tell each other the truth. We need to care enough to confront. We need to be those people that will care about each other. But Jesus says, I love you enough that I'm going to come and I'm going to rebuke you. And so be earnest and repent. In other words, change from your ways. There's hope for you. You can change this. And then he says, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me. See, on the other side of a critical conversation is the opportunity for the acceleration of unity. And so my question for you today is, are you feeling distant from God? Is there a distance that you feel? What critical conversation is Jesus trying to have with you that you are avoiding? What is it? And I want us to stand together. And I just want us to think about that for a moment. When we are confronted with the truth, when Jesus speaks to us the truth, what is it that we need to change? And what is it this morning that you need to change? What conversation is Jesus having with you? You know, you're here for a reason. God brought you here this morning for a purpose. And I don't know what that purpose is, but God does. God understands why you're here. And today, God is saying to each of us, yes, I love you. Yes, I sent my only son to die on the cross for you. Oh, you are dearly loved and you're saved by that grace through faith. That's it. But you know what? I love you enough. I'm going to rebuke you. There's a better life than the life that you're living now. There's truth that you need to embrace, and you need to repent. You need to change some things in your life. There's some things that you need to get rid of, and you need to turn to me. And so here I am. Jesus says, I'm knocking. I'm knocking.